Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the 13%. We are your hosts, Cynthia McDonald and Arthur Ward. Good
Yes.
evening, Arthur. How you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm just ready to jump into this uh, knowingly interesting conversation before it happens.
Right? Right? And if it's going to be anything, it will be knowingly interesting. So that
That's right.
that is an accurate statement. But before we actually get into the conversation, let's get some housekeeping out of the way.
Mhm.
Everyone, if you are watching, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to YFNA News, and hit that bell so that you get a notification every time that we go live.
Mhm.
Share this video also on your social media platforms. And also, if you like the content, consider being a Patreon and also buying us a coffee because we really do love coffee. I personally can't function without coffee, okay? So, all of those particular links and the whole thingies are in the show notes below.
Mhm.
Okay, now we got all that out the way. So, Arthur,
Yes.
I we are here to have a conversation with our esteemed guest that will be joining us shortly, and we're going to be talking to members of the diaspora about
Mhm.
Black America's relationship with the diaspora and vice versa.
Mhm.
But when we actually have these conversations, it's
Mhm.
important to frame them. You know what I'm saying? So, do you remember when Miss Arrivo was chosen to be Harriet Tubman?
Oh, that was last year. I don't remember what month, but it was last year.
Yeah, actually, she was chosen to be Harriet Tubman in 2018 per se, and then that
Yeah.
particularly started a lot of conversations. And
Right.
so I wanted to kind of frame this particular conversation with reading a bit from the Philadelphia Inquirer about who is Black in
Right.
America. Ethnic tensions fly between Black Americans and Black immigrants. So give
Mm.
me a moment while I pull up said article. You would think I'll be ready, right?
Right.
You think I would be, but it is what it is. What can I say? Okay, hold on, gym shoes. Okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit from this particular article. Okay, so it starts as soon as it was announced that the filming would start with for Harriet Tubman biopic with British Nigerian actress Cynthia Erivo as the lead, a social media fury erupted. An online appeal went up demanding that an African American woman be cast as Tubman, who, after escaping slavery, made more than a dozen trips to lead others to freedom on the Underground Railroad. In the
Mm.
change.org petition, which garnered 1,123 signatures by October 17th, organizer Tyler Holmes wrote, "We will boycott the film Harriet until you hire an actual Black American actress to play the part." Part of the anger directed at Arrivo was the social media users unearthed an old tweet where Arrivo had mocked a ghetto American accent. Critics said that she denigrated African Americans on one hand, but sought to portray an iconic African American hero on the other.
Mm.
That this came after a tangle of I'm sorry, this came after a tangle in August when Nigerian-born blogger and author
Love it.
Lovey Ajayi wrote that Tevin Campbell was too obscure a choice to sing at Aretha Franklin's funeral. Under what rock did they pull that name from? Ajayi quipped. The Twitter response was livid.
Mm.
Such arguments, dubbed by some the Diaspora War, reveal more than preferences over movie roles and pop culture. The Rancor provides a peek into a debate about identity in America, raising questions about how a changing Black population, increasingly diverse with immigrants and refugees from Africa, the Caribbean, Britain, and elsewhere, sees itself as is seen by the majority. Okay, so we read that, and now it's time to bring on our guest, and we're going to talk. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. So let me get my other document together as we make our introductions. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I would like for you all to welcome our guest, Sean David Onamusi, Senior Business Analyst and Rock Pharmaceuticals and founder of Redefine African Foundation, Michelle Richards, School Psychologist and Licensed Therapist, and Andrea Smith, Executive Director of Pembroke Tabarelli Art and Film Festival. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, everyone. How is everyone
morning
this
from
evening?
London?
Yes, good morning. Good morning to Sean. Good evening to everybody else. Just to let you all know that Sean is actually in the UK right now. Shout out to Dr. Who fans.
Oh, okay.
All right. See the curtain. Okay, so yeah. So I just wanted to first thank you guys for agreeing to come on and have this conversation. I really do appreciate it. I've been wanting to really have this conversation for a while about, you know, the relationship that Black America does have with the diaspora, and really get members of different people who come from different countries, their particular thoughts and sensibilities, and, you know, and where do we go from here? So I would like for each of you to kind of just give us a little bit more background about you, where you come from, and all that great stuff. So Michelle, let's start with you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I know that we've been in talks back and forth a little bit about this. I'm excited about the conversation. So I am actually an immigrant to the United States. I came here when I was 5 years old, and I was raised in Brooklyn. So I hailed from Guyana. So I've been here since I was 5 years old. I grew up in Brooklyn, which is like a melting pot, right? Of all kinds of races, Black Americans, Caribbean Americans, African Americans. And I have worked as a school psychologist and a therapist, primarily with our people, Black mental health. I'm a co-founder of a program called Prayer and Protect. So I'm glad to be here.
Nice. Thank you for being here. Andrea, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Andrea Smith. I am from Jamaica, and I also grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Yes, a melting pot, Caribbean, African Americans, Jewish. It was just, you know, great area, Crown Heights, Flatbush area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've been here since I was 13. I think most Americans travel to Jamaica more than I do. So they are there every year. I've been back quite just a few times since I've been in this country. Yes, so I'm the director of a film festival. It's a film festival that's focused on social justice. It's an international festival, so we get programming from all over the world. But as a person of color, or an African person, to be more specific, you know, I do focus a lot of the filming and programming on the issues that surround our communities on a global level. So yes, the Pembroke Tabarelli Arts and Film Festival.
Right. What I completely butchered, I do apologize.
That's okay.
If my mother's watching, don't get me. We have an echo. Let's be careful. Okay. I think that is over. I'm not sure. Okay. All right. And last but not least, Sean, please introduce yourself. Tell us more about you.
Okay, so my name is Sean David Onamusi, and some people say Sean, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm probably one of the only person in this midst that's come from a mixed background. So give you a background. I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria. I was about 18 years of age before I migrated to the UK. But prior to that, my grandmother had migrated to the UK from Nigeria over the last 60 plus years.
Mm.
So my parents were born here, or my mum was born here, and my aunties and their siblings were born here. But long story short, I found myself born in Nigeria. Now I count that as a blessing, and hopefully at the course of our conversation, I kind of touch on some of those lessons I learned of the benefit of being born on the soil and getting to understand certain things that we theoretically romanticize sometimes in the diaspora, but we don't authentically, kind of have that experience, as it were. So that's all my background. But principally, I'm a entrepreneur, but I like to, carve myself out as a thinking entrepreneur. So my perspective about entrepreneurship is beyond, just the profits. It's really about making an impact. And that's why I set up the Redefine Africa Foundation as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, again, thank you all for being here. Okay. So, all right. So what really got this whole idea going to saying, I want to talk to the people from the diaspora. If you all remember, I want to say this happened about a month ago and broke the internet.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did. And we had all types of people chiming in on Adele and the Jamaican flag, including my mama. I'm not gonna repeat what she said. I'm not gonna repeat it. And just to be clear, you guys. So my mom is and my mom is actually an immigrant. She is from Jamaica, and my father is ADOS. Okay, so but I was born and raised here. I've been to Jamaica once. So Andrea, don't fret. You ain't the only one who more Americans been back to Jamaica more than us. So I think that you probably got us both beat. Okay. Now, what was interesting is that you had like a lot of, Black Americans, like Native Black Americans, African Americans, ADOS people who was kind of like, what is this? Like, Adele, come on, right? And, they accused her oftentimes of cultural appropriation, as you can see from these particular tweets. Now, what was interesting was other people's comments from African Americans accusing Miss Adele of cultural appropriation. Gosh, guys, I cannot talk. Okay, got it out. Okay, so as we can see here, this is some dumb effery. Americans took it upon themselves to collectively be outraged on behalf of Jamaicans and Africans because Adele wore a Jamaican flag bikini top and African Bantu knots on her head. Thank you, Adele, for representing the Bantu culture. Love Africans. And we have some other stuff that was said. This one was interesting. The originals Jamaican. Originals? I don't understand why that was plural, but whatever. So the originals Jamaicans and Africans don't really care. She is paying homage. Some of y'all African Americans don't really know your culture, be screaming culture appropriator, yet can't stand next to your true, pure African ancestors. Go and visit home.
Ouch.
And yeah, buddy. And this one was nice. I'm Bantu, and we really, really, really do not give a F. What annoys us more is African Americans who constantly stake claim on a culture they know nothing about. I actually live on the continent whose style you are being accused of misappropriating. Do your thing. Hugs and kisses. XOXO. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, but the thing about it is that I've noticed that there's always been for a while now that I'm just noticing this clash, right? That happens oftentimes between, Black Americans and, either Black immigrants or either others from, other Blacks from, different countries. So I'm like, what? Okay. So when you all saw this and you see these particular tweets, what comes to mind? Let's start with you, Michelle.
What comes to mind is for me, it's an unending battle, right? So
Mm.
as an immigrant in the United States, my family and I, we had our fair share of being different within a primarily Black American neighborhood. But it's sad because Twitter is the worst at us being pit against each other with African Americans, and now, you know, the ADOS movement. And then we have people from other countries who totally misunderstand the African American culture as well, that because they're more grounded, right? So African Americans were, I mean, we were all taken. We had that triangle, the Caribbean was dropped off. And then, you know, here in the Americas where there was an identity that was essentially stripped. So while our African brothers and our Caribbean brothers and sisters still have a semblance of, you know, culture that they hold on to, that they take pride in, I think there's this misunderstanding about the outrage that Black Americans will have against people that they feel are culturally misappropriating things that I mean, to say that African Americans don't understand the Bantu culture is almost hypocritical, because does Adele understand the Bantu culture any more than an African American who wants to speak out against it? But yet we come to the rescue of the, as so appropriately put in Black Panther, the colonizer. So you know, it's sad because you see this. You see, we're pit against each other. And I believe the pitting against each other is controlled by colonial slavery narrative that we've bought into.
Andrea, you want to chime on in?
Yeah, I was going to say that those conversations and or tweets and or comments that are coming from Jamaicans or Africans or, you know, other people from diaspora is not necessarily representative of what people in those particular areas actually think. So yeah, we have to understand.
But there's a lot of it.
I totally understand that, but we also
you can't
but
assume
may I
it's just a small segment of people doing
no, I'm not saying it is.
Go ahead.
But we also have to understand that people within those areas as well, they may live in those areas and they may understand their culture on a level that's just about living it, but not studying it.
Right.
So they themselves don't even understand the impact of slavery on them. They're on those shores. Just because you're in Jamaica eating curry goat and listening to reggae doesn't mean you understand your culture as an African person and how that culture is impacted by all of these things. And cultural appropriation is not just something that that is being spoken about by only African Americans. I have relatives in Jamaica that spoke about that Adele thing and call it, you know, they use Jamaican curse words, and they did not like it either. And they live there, but they are people who are educated about their culture. They know their African origins. They understand the impact of slavery on them as well as the diaspora. So there's a level of education that's also needed for us to have these conversations and to move us forward, because a lot of us are still in like Stockholm syndrome.
Absolutely.
You know, so we have to understand that as well.
You know, when you would say like the cuss word, that's why I said I was not going to repeat what my mother said.
Yeah, notice this is what I noticed. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying that you know, she said I would say the nice version of what she said. She said that, you know, why don't Adele take her non-Bantu wearing not self China bumps, because, you know, she old school Jamaican, and also, you know, put the Union Jack on her instead of, you know, the Jamaican flag on her, and then expletive. Okay, so continue. Yeah. But Arthur, what were you going to say? Arthur, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was going to say that Oh, I'm sorry. What I was going to say is this. Mostly now, I don't know if you all noticed, but I've been to 14 countries in Africa.
Okay.
More countries than most Africans have been to. And in all the countries that I've been to, talking to people that were well educated, also talking in the streets and just meeting people, Pan-Africanism is not going on in Africa. Tribalism is. That's what people lead off with when they identify themselves. At least that's how they did in Africa, and they were like this ubiquitously between the West, the Central, and the East Coast of Africa. This is how they roll. And as far as like their opinions of African Americans, I can say face to face that the average man on the street, I can't say that I was treated badly in Africa. I got great treatment wherever I went, but I was treated that way not as a Black person, but as an American. And I noticed that very distinct feeling. I was not looked upon as a Black person. I was looked upon as an American.
Interesting. Sean, can you speak
Well, I
to
think
that?
that's an important point to make
Yeah.
as far as injecting into this conversation.
Sure. Thanks for that, Author. I think that's a valid point, and I like the fact that you brought up your experience in Africa specifically. So, like I said in my introduction, I sort of have a different background, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that I was born in Africa, I lived in Africa. I kind of, at the age of 18, I knew everything about African American culture as portrayed by Hollywood. Right?
Exactly.
And if it wasn't Hollywood, it was CNN. It was still controlled media. Now we found out in 2020 that they're all playing on the same books, right? But at that time, we didn't know. So you would have two different types of people. You would see the street smart, which I had the opportunity to be part of, sort of like the street life. And then you had the elite. That was, sort of the distinction. Now, I think more recently, I've started to realize that what happened in Africa and in most African countries is that the elites replaced the white masters. So even though most African countries got independence, they never got liberation. Now, if you look at the story on the other side of the pond where you are, there's the horror stories of slavery, and then you also have the trauma that exists and persisted out of that as well. So you have two worlds that are actually suffering from traumas and dealing with it differently.
Exactly.
So I think that is probably what, taking it back to the Adele story, that's what I noticed the most, are differences. Rather than that unifying element, it was more about, okay, I know more about the culture, and then the other person saying, no, I live more about the culture, and we're like, that was good maybe about 40 years ago. Times have changed. Now it's even more dangerous to be Black. So can we just unify on this Black element, right? And look at the nuances and deal with the nuances on the side more often than not. And I'm a bit concerned that most thought leaders, the radio host, Charlemagne, and, just a couple of other, sort of figures are not highlighting it as much, because I feel like, you need to highlight that's the conquer, divide and rule tactic that the enemy has always used. So that's sort of my take.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
interesting.
Well, I would say this. Wouldn't you say, wouldn't you say though that these things, I mean, we could maybe put some of this on Europeans and the conquerors and so forth, but the dynamics that went on before that caused African Americans to be enslaved in this country were divisions that were going on between Africans way before white people had any real influence on that continent. Would you admit to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's an element of that, right, that I think
Does everybody hear me?
in history.
Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think there's an element of that that's still lost in history, right? Where
Yes, I can hear you.
we're sort of still focusing on maybe one side of it as opposed to the to both sides. So I give a typical example. When we think of post-colonialism in Africa or post-slavery in Africa,
Sure.
we tend to think about the spiritual element first rather than the intellectual side of it. And then there's the growing sort of demographic that are focusing on the sort of the logical side of things. So they're telling you about the kingdom of Mali and what's happened there. But then they're also losing touch with the spiritual side. So it's almost like, again, we are divided on whether our history, our authentic history, is that of humanity or is it of spirituality? So we keep going back and forth on that. That's just my
But
view.
you know what? Let me jump in here. I hear what you're saying, Arthur. But I think that is I think that's an argument that I believe the ADOS use, is that we want to hold African brothers and sisters responsible for slavery, and that we hyper focus on the Europeans. I don't think they should take some of the blame. I think they should take the blame for the exploitation of the continent that has a whole, like Sean points out, the continent of Africa, the culture of Africa, the people of Africa. It's not a hierarchy. It's not a hierarchy that we find in European Americans, a conquering and a hierarchy of things. You find a coexistence. We coexist in the circle of life. There's spirituality, there's culture. It's complex. Then you found a group of people that have an ideology that is very much, I conquer, I defeat, I divide. And they went into a continent who had slavery, right? Who had slavery, because when we consider tribalism, tribalism was, I conquered your tribe, you came and you became my slave.
Exactly.
Of slavery was not the degradation of slavery that Europeans inflicted upon us. So I really can't say that I can jive with that. I can say, well, we need to hold what, West Africa.
Well, okay. Well,
can I?
Well, let me put it this way.
Also,
Let me put it this way.
One moment, Arthur, before you start. Wait one second, Arthur, before you start.
We do admit. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to speak specifically to what Michelle said concerning about holding Africans responsible, because one person made a point in the chat, and I kind of wanted to highlight it.
Okay.
When it said,
"No." Do we have access to that, or are we?
If you actually go to the YouTube link like that I sent to everybody, you'll have access to the chat. Okay. But I wanted to highlight this specifically about not holding Africa responsible, but that we're not tribe. And but before I really go into that, one of the things that I wanted to say is that it's not necessarily holding Africans responsible as far as slavery is concerned. But one of the things that happens oftentimes when we're having these conversations specifically about slavery is that for some reason, we like to leave out the element of specifically elite and other slave traders that were also Africans that was complicit in the slave trade. There was nobody, oftentimes this narrative happens that white people came from Europe, came into the African continent and kidnapped people and then sent them in the Middle Passage to, the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and North America, right? But you cannot enter into these particular areas without having assistance, right? And so the thing about it is that, the responsibility part is that let's tell the whole story, right? We have to make sure that we have to say that, listen, we know this occurred, and we know that that there were slave traders who worked with European slave traders in order to move their people, whether they got conquered in a tribal war or overland, whatever, that they say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to trade you for goods and services or what have you, and you got to go ahead and go where you're going.
And Cynthia, I understand that. I definitely understand what you're saying. I just feel like, why is it that, why does that need, why is that? I mean, we know that, like, so as intellectuals, and we know that really could.
I don't think we quite know. I don't think we know the full picture, right? So if I put some context on sort of that narrative on the slave trades and the existing elites and that relationship they had between each other. So my grand aunt that raised me after I was born in Nigeria, my mum left with my grand aunt, and my grand aunt who raised me actually dealt with slave. Her mum and herself actually dealt with Portuguese slave traders as well. So what they did was they traded materials. So in the story that I remember, and like you would, verify, most of our stories are oral stories. That's why we're very energetic and storytellers. It's part of the way we lived in Africa, right? So the way she passed on that story to me was that these slave masters had studied the relationship. So they had been trading over time, 50 years, 60 years, and they had welcomed them. They had made them a part of themselves. And it's that deceit that created that level of, trauma for the Africans on ground. So it's not just that, it's not an either or. Oh yes, we've got, slave traders in Africa before the white man came. Oh no, there wasn't any. It's not an either or. There was evil on both sides, right? But they just used more machinery to enforce their evil.
Right, because we heard the stories that they came first with gunpowder, they came with the mirror, they gave them these things. Right. They ingratiated themselves into the culture and the people. So yes, we had those relationships going on in Africa, but our slaves weren't treated in the fashion that slavery in America and in the Caribbean.
So you can see the reflection in today's world.
Exactly, and I think the conversation we understand it intellectually.
One second, go ahead, Andrew. Go finish, and then Arthur, you chime in.
Conversation. Arthur said earlier
but Michelle. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish, Andrea, and then Arthur, you chime in, please.
I was just saying that we understand, like as Michelle said, Sean, we understand that this happened. We understand the relationship that transpired to us getting here. I think the conversation should be more around us coming back together. What's going on the continent, what's going on here, where the divide and conquer is evident in everything that's happening in our culture. They did a great job when they brought us here. And because remember, when they brought us here, we were on slave ships with people who didn't speak the same language. We couldn't communicate with each other for the most part. We were packed on these ships with people from different tribes who spoke different languages. So there was no communication. So we couldn't unify and fight the people that brought us. So it started there from that very moment of us leaving the continent, of that separation. And that job was done systematically.
Yes.
And we're still feeling the effects today. And we need to move beyond that narrative now.
Arthur, what were you going to say to that? Arthur? Okay.
No, I was going to say, that there's a car element here. It's like Andrea, it's like, now, two things. We made it clear that there was a slave trade going on between Africans and Europeans. Is that correct?
We recognize that there was trading going on.
We made that clear, right?
Yes. But before they started,
okay, so that's a yes, right? Okay.
We have to remember. We have to recognize the type of trading that was going on. Let's keep it simple. Before they started.
Okay, let's keep it simple.
Merchandise marketing, and remember, Africans were involved in slave trade. The Arabs were involved.
A trade happened.
The Jews were involved.
We can keep it simple.
I don't think there was a trade.
We can keep it simple.
With
Wait.
the definition of
We
trade.
can keep it simple.
Wait 1 second. Michelle,
It was.
let Arthur finish. Go ahead.
Africans themselves have been through it. And we can show you articles.
Yes.
We can show you articles written by Africans,
What is the
descendants of the slave traders themselves that admit to a trade.
Okay.
But what the point I was trying to tell Andrea is this. If you sell me a car, I don't care how well you've taken care of that car. Once you sell me that car, what I do with it is my business.
And I'm not responsible for what you do with it, correct?
What I do with the car that you sold to me
and I'm not
is my
responsible.
business.
And in that
Right.
amount, I'm not responsible for what you do with the car.
But
Once
also,
you have it in your possession.
You are responsible. You are responsible for selling it.
yeah, but
I'm not if I'm taking care of the car,
but you are
and
responsible
I'm
for
getting it
selling it. Is
detailed.
that
When
correct?
I have it, I'm getting it detailed. I'm getting it polished. I'm treating it really well. I'm giving it premium gas. I'm doing all of that.
Uh-huh.
When I sell it to you,
Right.
I'm treating my car well because I
Right.
need this car. It serves me, and it has a purpose in my life. And then when I give you the car, yeah, if you put bottom 87 gas in it,
Right.
that's on you, brother, not on me. If
But
you
what-
don't
but
feel
what's
it, you
the
don't wash
purpose?
it, that's on you.
So my thing is what is
Now-
the purpose? Because we can say that
Now,
about
the third
any
point-
ethnic group. We can
The
say that about
third point, as far as like, the point that I'm trying to get to is this: if we know that certain Africans sold us to this hellhole that we went through for over 400 years in this country, wouldn't you say that would kind of complicate things as far as a reunification?
No,
it's kind of
not
like
at
if
all.
you sold your daughter to
Not at
a
all.
sex trader or
Okay,
something.
okay.
And
That's
then you
okay.
talking about
Okay, hold on. Hi, everybody. Okay,
know?
1 second. One second, because because one of the things I always I often preface this is like that. Oh, no worries. One of the things I preface is that we want to make sure that we are respectful of each other, even though that I know that a lot of us have our points of view and we want to get them out.
Sure.
But when we are talking to one another, I want to make sure that everyone is able to get their points across. Thank you. Now, Sean, I believe that you wanted to go ahead and jump in and make a point in this particular inference.
I was going to ask Arthur about numbers.
Sure.
How much of those slaves that left African shores were actually sold and not physically dragged out of their homes and deceived and shot and killed in some cases? Because that's where you get that narrative off, and that's why I feel it's not as important if someone sold you off as much.
No. If that happened,
did you say if?
No. Go ahead. Finish what you were going to say, Arthur.
No. If that happened, I would say for sure that it would probably be maybe 2% or less, because there was an actual trade going on. If they were dragging and kidnapping and all this sort of thing happening, there wouldn't have been anything to build slave castles or slave trading posts. These were all done in cooperation with African elites.
We need to kill that thought. We need to kill that thought right now. It's inconsequential in my view, right? It's like, so what?
Well, to be honest, I would have to say it's not as inconsequential as you think. And the reason, and this is wait, let me finish saying this. And the reason, this is the reason why I say that. As far as the data concerning what is the percentage of ancestors who came from majority West African and Central African countries that was either kidnapped versus sold, we don't necessarily have the data numbers, what it's broken down to from the through the quintile, the decile, et cetera, et cetera. However, one of the things that we do know is that Africa itself is a huge continent.
Right.
And you also know that you can't necessarily just walk on up into that particular area and just start snatching folk willy-nilly. You're going to, and that's why I made my point earlier. And the thing about it is that what it comes to, and I believe that somebody said this in the chat, is that we have to come to some type of understanding of this happened, okay? And since this is something that happened, we can definitely say that it does have a consequential point of how we view one another. From the ones who are still, back on the continent, who may be from those areas, and versus the ones who are not. Because sometimes it does definitely have issues on how we view one another.
But
Okay.
Cynthia, I think the origins of those thoughts of how we view one another comes from a very white supremacy mindset.
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying that at all. But part of it is white supremacy. A lot of it is white supremacy. Let me tell you this. I have no problem with blaming white supremacy for the majority of things that's going on with Black people all around the world. Okay, know that. Okay, but at the same time, we have to also look at white supremacy as a hierarchy, okay? Absolutely. And with the hierarchy of white supremacy, there's going to be different insert points on where different groups of people are going to fit in. And where you have these particular when you have these particular insert points, there's going to be actions and consequences that come from where these people are fitting in. So and part of that is what happened when that even brought us to this spot in the first place.
But I think what's important, we have to shape the conversation around not whole people, but individual people, the elite people. I don't think anyone is saying that they couldn't or they didn't have help, but that we can say that about the natives. We can say that just about any group of people. When you look at large part, India and China, those aren't easy countries to navigate. You have to have individuals who are a part of that. But I think to step back and to say reconciliation is strained because you sold my people into slavery, I think that's not a fair thing.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that I'm not saying that reconciliation can happen. What I'm saying is, and I believe that a lot of people are saying is, let's tell the whole truth.
But here's
let's actually be, very transparent about this happened. You know what I'm saying? And because it's still, and to be honest, because we're still talking about it right now, this is a big elephant in the room.
Yeah, but
I'd like to say
I think this sort of conversation is a good start, right? Because now you're opening up that sort of conversation to a wider audience to have that cross bridge conversation as well, because I can guarantee you there are a lot of Africans more averse than I am who are willing to have that conversation, but they are not being brought to the table from this perspective. Most of the time it's from an African American perspective or white colonialism perspective, not so much bridging the gap between what's currently in Africa in its truest form, which has not been adulterated yet, as it were. At least there's been some adulterations here and there, but that's not beyond repair. Those things are just, results of a global world that we live in today, right? So there's still elements of that can be salvaged. So we need to start having that conversation with those intellectuals. And you can see it with Muhammad Ali back in the days. He went back to Africa and spoke to the intelligent elite, as you would say, right? Who understood the culture, because most of the populations, they're not concerned about the culture. They're concerned about food. They're concerned about eating. That's it. And in every society, you see that as well. They're cultural elites. And then you see most people just, it's all about survival. And we can't ramp down the survival thought through this people and say, oh yeah, you need to come up to a cultural elite. It's not going to happen if you don't have the desire, right? You have to have that desire to read the books. You have to have the desire to go on on YouTube and get that sort of information. It just doesn't fall on you.
I'd like to say two things. One, I'm a part of a group on the continent. They started a African Facebook for lack of a better. It's called Kuman. It's the guys that started from Mali, and it means to speak. And they're interested in Pan-Africanism and bridging that gap through this, bringing us all together. It's shameful tag, but it's www.kuman, KOUHMAN.com.
Okay.
And so they're definitely interested in this conversation on the continent. And I've been trying to get African American people involved in this movement. But here's the thing. You have a lot of people in this country that, one, does not acknowledge their African ancestry. There are a lot of people who, I'm not African, I'm American. So you can't have this conversation about reconciliation and unification if you don't even accept that you're African to begin with. They don't want to deal with the fact that they were brought here. A lot of them, now you have this movement saying that I was already here.
Yeah.
I was already here.
And I think we've gotten to that point, or at least we should try and get to that point where that's okay. If you decide you want to identify with that, then that's okay. But there are a growing number of people that are refusing to take that identity. Why not focus on that and build the culture as a whole?
Understood that, but you can't bridge the culture if you don't even accept that aspect of your culture.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but hold on. So I would say this. Let me ask this to you, Sean.
Well, Michelle.
One second, Arthur. Before you go on, I want to ask this question to Sean specifically. When you are saying who you are, how do you preface yourself? Do you preface yourself as African, Nigerian, your tribe, where you're from, your nationality? How do you preface yourself? How do you identify yourself?
Unfortunately, I can't help myself. I say I'm Nigerian. I'm born Nigerian. You know, I am who I am. So I don't. It was when I got to the UK that I realized I was black. All the time, I just thought I was a human being. I was black and they were white. Right. But then it became clearer when I came here. So to answer your question, my identity is I'm African, I'm black, and I'm Nigerian.
Okay. So, but one of the things that you made very clear was that when you first, like before you even got to UK, and you would say who you are, you said your country. I am Nigerian.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Arthur, what were you going to say to that? Arthur, what were you going to delay? Okay. Arthur, what were you going to say?
Well, no, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, it seems like to me that Pan-Africans are always trying to devalue our investment here.
No.
You know,
what do you mean?
We put in the heaviest investment in this country that built the foundation for the most. Wait a minute. Let me finish. Let me finish. Okay.
Sure.
That built the most consequential country in the millennium. And then I'm not supposed to be here. My bones are here. My sweat is here. My blood is here. My lynched uncle that was trying to vote is here. You know, my great-great-grandmother that was ran off of her land that was part of the Great Migration is here. And I'm supposed to deny all of that to say that I'm African and face a continent that possibly sold me to this condition? I don't think so.
Okay.
I will say this though, and Andrea, this is something that
I mean, I'm so far removed. I would say I'm genetically African. I am genetically African, but as far as the culture that I built, when I went to Japan and I'm walking down the street in the Ginza late at night, you know what was coming out the clubs? Jazz. That was created by ADOS.
Right.
Rhythm
Bronx.
and blues that was created by ADOS.
But the
blues that was created by ADOS. I didn't hear no Japanese music playing nowhere. It was all Black American music.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody is. I don't see. And I think.
And I'm very proud of that.
I think what you're saying is that Pan-Africanism says you can't be proud to have an African, an American, a Black American, descendants slave heritage. No one.
No.
That's not true.
No.
Mm.
Pan-Africans
Well,
never believed in that superiority complex, right? Pan-Africans always believed, and at the root of it was, we saw ourselves as identical with
Right.
these people until they then came with a machinery and took over it. And we retained that pride in our self-identity.
Exactly.
So that's what
Sean,
Pan-African is, in my view.
Sean, I will tell you this, and this is just from being a daughter of an immigrant.
Mm.
So my mother made it very clear to me when we were having these particular conversations growing up, when people would say to me that, oh, you're half Jamaican, or you're Jam American, or Jamaican, or, you know, whatever they decide to come up with that day, right? And, you know, I would go to my mother and say to her, hey, people are saying I'm half Jamaican. What say you? Woo, woo, woo. And she said, no, sweetie, you are not Jamaican. I am Jamaican.
Right.
You are American.
Right.
And one of the things that I've had my back and forth with different people on Twitter, and especially with this whole conversation about Pan-Africanism. And I don't necessarily have an issue with the ideology, and I see where it comes from. But at the same time, often we get a lot of pushback from saying I am my lineage is an American descendant of slavery, not necessarily African. And the reason being is because my ancestors that actually came here, built this country, and invested their lives, blood, sweat, and tears have not, let me finish, have been removed from the African continent for centuries. So is it what the word? OMG. I don't want to say logical, but does it make sense for a person? Wait 1 second. For a person to actually say, if they're lineaged here and they've been here for so long, to say, oh, I'm African.
Why not?
So I think addressing the Pan-Africanism, right, and these conversations coming out from Twitter and all the parts of the world. When we engage with the likes of Professor Lumumba, who's currently still actively discussing Pan-Africanism, right? His concern is that most of the noise around Pan-Africanism now is not what it represented. It's not about this black power element of it, as it were, right? Where you're either African or you're American, or you're either this or that. It's really Pan-Africanism says, retrace your steps. You can still believe Christianity. You can still be a Christian like Professor Lumumba is, and still identify with your root. You can still embrace the accent, because I'm just like you. I get the beats as well, right? And people tell me, well, your accent is not quite Nigerian yet, right? You've lost it, you know, and I almost feels like a schizophrenia sometimes, right? Where I've got to switch between British and Nigerian, and sometimes I forget myself. I forget the crowd I'm in, right?
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to keep up to.
And the reality, based on what you're saying, I've lived here longer than I've lived in Jamaica. Culturally, I'm more American, but I can't say I'm American, right? I can't say I'm American. I can't say I'm Jamaican. Nobody in Jamaica acknowledges me as Jamaican. You know what I'm saying? So, and Malcolm said, just because you put a cat in the oven and bake it doesn't make it biscuit. No. So you were,
that just makes it a burnt cat.
Exactly. So yes, you were born here. Yes, you can. Your ancestors, but those ancestors that were brought here came from somewhere. They have a beginning. So I'm not saying that you deny what your ancestors did in this country and what you're producing in this country and bringing to this country. No one's saying that. But why can't you take pride in your heritage and your lineage and still be American? That's the problem. It's like African Americans, and not all.
I have no pride. I have no pride in my African heritage.
Okay, fine, and you don't have to. That's your individual choice.
No pride whatsoever.
What I'm saying, and so don't make it a thing that Pan-Africans.
Look at this. You can't.
One moment, may I finish? May I finish, please?
Okay, but your parents.
all I'm
Go ahead,
saying
go
is,
ahead.
all I'm saying is,
Yeah.
don't put that belief system on Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is not saying that you need to deny your American identity, deny your American lineage.
Well, Andrea, depending
Oh,
on
you haven't
what
talked to Cam Howard.
Pan-African, right? Well, no,
Okay,
right. I must say, depending, and I
Just
will
like
say
with,
this:
just like with Christianity, there's a lot of subsets. There's a lot of
Sure.
belief system
Oh,
within it.
child, we ain't even gonna get on Christianity
Right,
right
so
now,
I'm only
especially when you're
gonna
talking to
Yeah.
two atheists. So,
But
but
Jen-
one of the things, but
Right,
one of the things I would say to you,
But-
even making to that point when it comes to Christianity, and you have different subsects and ideologies and things
I'm
of
just
that
saying
nature.
within the movement, there's different ideologies, there's different thoughts.
Sure.
So
But
we,
you know,
we gotta come together. That's.
But one of the things I would say to you is, depending on which Pan-African that you speak to and what their ideology is, oftentimes if you are anchoring yourself in your Americanism rather than your Africanism, whatever, I made that up. But if you're doing that, then you are, for some reason, that's incorrect. That's not the way that you're supposed to go. That that you ain't black. You know what I'm saying? That's oftentimes a lot of the rhetoric that's
I
being
don't agree with
played.
that. I don't agree with that. And I don't think most people let me put it this way. Most people that's interested in the unification of us as a people, that's not their belief system.
I agree with that.
The idea is just, that we need to come together globally, Black folks, regardless of where you're
No,
from.
we don't. No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do, because
We have not been together for centuries.
Colonial, it's a European mentality to believe.
Well, there's
experiencing racism in London, in England. There's experience in racism in Denmark. They're experiencing racism in Japan. So racism is everywhere when it comes to Black folks.
But racism, but can you agree that, Andrea, that racism actually shows up differently depending on where country you're in?
Absolutely, but the point is that we're still experiencing it no matter where you're from as a Black person. So the fact that we are all experiencing.
But Michelle.
Yes, sir.
No. You know what? The kind of disarray that I saw. Look, let me say this. I saw a lot of good things in Africa, but the disarray that I saw in Africa basically came from the various governments. Okay, what'd you say?
Yes.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
No, you're right. Colonialism has wreaked havoc on the continent.
No, I said, no. But see, what is there to be proud of? What is there to be proud of if I've got 54 African leaders that can't fight off colonialism, they can't stop the Chinese from taking over? They are doing nothing over there that makes me proud to be African. Okay? If Pan-African is going to happen,
hey guys,
Pan-African governments. No, let me say this. Let me say this.
And then I'm going to have to go to Sean.
Africanism is going to be true. Let the 54 African governments in Africa become Pan-African first. Then I can believe it.
Okay. You know what? And I really ain't got no problem with that. Sean, because I know that. So, because I agree. I mean, Africa is not Pan. We got 3,000 different tribes with over 2,000 different languages in 54 different countries, and they're all trying to figure it all out. You know what I'm saying? And so, that's why I said, it's appreciable, but is it operational right now? Sean, say something to that, because I know that you're going to have to wrap up soon.
Okay, so I think my last words will be this, right? I think there needs to be an urgency.
That's true. Right? The African Union rejected it.
Okay. Well,
I
think there's a delay.
To be an urgency that we put to this, right?
One second, Sean. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Sean, go ahead. Yeah. Arthur, I think you're on a delay.
Is that better?
Sean, go ahead. Start over. Yes.
Okay, so I was going to say that I think there needs to be an urgency to this messaging that we've got to put out there. The Pan-Africanism that we are experiencing today is not what it is about. right? Most of the conversation needs to go back to identifying with humanity, because we had a history before, and there are a lot of Africans will understand just as much as African Americans think they know. So we need to move beyond who knows the most and really identify what are the key areas, entrepreneurship, what are those key metrics that we can really push forward to solve those concerns. Because I have kids that are growing up in the UK and they're going to face the same issues my mother faced.
Absolutely.
You have kids that are going to face the same issue their grandfather faced. And
Exactly.
the good part the good part of the world we live in right now is money is actually quicker to make these days, right?
Right.
You can start a YouTube channel, you can do all that stuff, but that money is not just for you to get the next Gucci pairs and stuff. Let's really start to plug in to institutions and shows like this that can help us to get that conversation going. Because I'm personally concerned, you know, for my kids.
Exactly.
I don't know about anybody else.
No, I mean, like, I don't have children, but I am concerned about the next generation. This is why we do what we do. And especially when we have these conversations about issues that affect our communities, and also politics, and being able to advocate in these particular spaces, because, you know, face it, Black America need a lot. Right. And there's a lot of barriers that have been placed there, you know, on the hierarchy of white supremacy, that has really built these walls to keep that from being accessed. Right. But, you know, but like, I know that. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrea, and then I'm going to segue.
No, I was going to say that's happening all over. That's the problem. And that's why we need the unity. It's not so that we can deny our, you know, wherever we were physically born. But what the common denominator is that our ancestors came from a particular continent or a particular place that we can identify with. Whether you know what part of the continent they came from or not, the point is that that heritage is what unifies us. And if we can agree on that, right, we can move forward. But if we we can't put everybody in a box and say, oh, just because Pan-Africanism is this necessarily. But we do need to move beyond that conversation, because as Sean said, and as you said, Cynthia, the next generation we're missing we're going to miss the boat, and we're going to get further and further away from unification if we don't tackle it. I just want to say, I'm thankful to this COVID, this pandemic, because this has brought us to these conversations. It sat us down so we can start thinking and focusing on issues that are important. And this is one of them that it may have been there before this happened, but we see more of the conversation happening because people have had time to kind of really, really sit down and think about the issues and the problems, and now we're looking for solutions, and we all can be that solution. Whether we want to call it Pan-Africanism, we want to call it unification, we want to just say, but we're all in this together. That's, you know, we're all in this together.
And I think Pan-Africanism is to support the
look, I don't want to be.
Oh,
no,
wait a minute.
No. But see, I don't want to. Yeah. I don't know what you mean by unification, because if it's just to sit, let me finish what I'm saying. If it's just to sit down and eat food,
no,
we ain't doing that. Okay.
No, brother. No.
But what I'm saying is, if there's going to be any kind of unification,
we all talked about entrepreneurship.
If there's going to be.
Why can't we build business?
Sean found that funny.
If there's going to be any, okay, let me finish.
Next time I'm in America, I'm going to bring food.
There has to be right. There has to be 5 areas in which Pan-African is real to me, and those are business, economics, politics, education, and systems. Now, but if we ain't talking about that, we can go and get a hamburger.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
You understand what I'm saying?
I agree with you 100%. That's what I'm all about. I'm with you.
Right. You know, and one of the things that Michelle said, that and I wanted her to say it again when I put up, like, you know, how can Pan-Africanism support ADOS? You said, sis.
Right. To be a Pan-Africanist is to support ADOS.
Exactly.
Hands down. Is to support reparations. I was looking for the criteria to claim reparations. I wouldn't be one of them, and I wouldn't want to get reparations. I have a great deal of respect.
We're not entitled to it.
I have to. Sorry, sorry, I have to leave at this point. I really apologize because of the time.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Sean, for coming on. We're going to wrap up very soon, but thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And to Arthur's point, the LGBTQ community in America have benefited from the civil rights movement.
Exactly.
Women have benefited from the civil rights movement.
Exactly.
Special education for children who learn differently have benefited from the civil rights movement. So to be a Pan-Africanist, in my head, is to support ADOS.
Absolutely.
Where I pull away, where I shy away, is the divisiveness of saying, when we come to, yes, full truth. I am about truth. I'm about full transparency. My issue is, nowhere in history do we say to Jewish people, well, you know, there had to be some elite Jews that led them to where you were. Well, you know, they had some Native Americans that showed them where you were. Well, you know, there must have been some Chinese that showed them where you were. Why is it that we are the ones that's holding our people to this onus of you sold us? That is a narrative and a rhetoric that does not.
Well, Michelle, I would definitely say I do appreciate you saying that, you know, to support, you know, this particular work is to support ADOS. But, you know, but as far as like, you know, speaking specifically on the divisiveness, you know, I can definitely say that, one, again, like I was mentioning previously, we are already living in a diaspora that's divided because we have continents in between us, we have countries in between us, and we have cultures in between us, okay? And also we have to acknowledge that there have been oftentimes different inferences about what has been said about each other, okay? Like, you know, one of the things I wanted to bring up something that unfortunately Sean had to go, you know, I wanted to talk about the word akata. You know, and how oftentimes, like, you know, you hear oftentimes, don't date akata, don't talk to akata, don't get involved with akata, you know. So we're gonna have to have them bring on. We're just gonna have to have this whole discussion all over again, okay? And because I really want to get into that, but you know, but no, it is. I agree. I totally agree. It's out of ignorance, but you know, but at the same time, as I was mentioning previously, is that we. And I would even say this, like, in a familial sense, when I even think about my own family, like, if we have a fight about something, we can never get beyond the fight until we actually take responsibility for our effects, about our actions in the fight. You know, I called you a poo head, and you called me a poo head. You know what I'm saying? So can you know I'm saying, but oftentimes, like, this is not what happens. You know what I'm saying? And then so like when you have ADOS that came around and say, this is who we are, this is our justice claim, then oftentimes we have people coming for us in the diaspora.
This is who we are.
This just because we identified ourselves, but no one ever does that on the other side. Like I said, like, my mother was very poignant with me when she said, you are American, I am Jamaican, we are not the same in that particular, you know, the only thing that's same with us is that I'm her kid, right? But you know, but like I said, but that distinction of identity it has always been made.
See,
and then that's when that.
See, I have an issue with that because, you know, you were like a lot of people within ADOS still don't think you are an ADOS, even though you were born here and your mother may tell you you're American, but within that, the purity or the people who are in the purity of ADOS would not necessarily consider you ADOS.
Oh, well, them people are stupid. But
that's my point. Exactly.
That's stupid, right? Because, like, you know, because regardless, I've actually had, you know, a whole thing. You know, I had a few conversations concerning that, just because, like, you know, because it comes that.
Exactly. There's stupidity on both sides. So we need to get beyond that. Totally understand what you're saying. And I wanted to just briefly, you mentioned at the very beginning of the show about the Cynthia Avos and the, you know, the Europeans, Blacks from the diaspora taking iconic African-American roles. And I just wanted to, okay, I have a problem with that only on a couple of levels. One, I have a problem because, two, she disrespected the culture.
Right.
And a lot of times, a lot of those British actors, I'm an actress as well. So I'm coming from it from that perspective. And I'm going to say two things about that. One is you've had a lot of British actors who come here and they disrespect the culture. And I don't think they should be rewarded with those roles. That's just on one aspect, because they're not respectful of what African Americans have gone through in this country to provide them the privilege of being able to get that role. So that's number one. However, on the flip side, I'm Jamaican. So I am very annoyed when I see all these people, African Americans, in what was the name of that show that just came on recently? First of all, what was the name of that movie with them in the bobsled team?
Oh, you talking about that movie that came out in the 90s?
Yeah. Like they were all African Americans playing Jamaicans. Then you had all the new TV show with that was very big. With and the I want to say it's one of these superhero movie television shows, and they had the episodes, the series was all Jamaicans. And so
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about, okay, so the first one you're talking about is Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings, yes.
Bad movie. And then you were talking about the second season of Luke Cage.
Yes,
now I will say I will say this.
So let's you know.
No, I mean I you know, but see, the thing about it is, Andrea, I feel you. And this is one of the things that, you know, I would say when it comes to, you know, playing our parts. If we're going to actually talk about people's stories, it should be as authentic as possible.
I agree.
So like in Cool Runnings, when they did that, they should have casted Jamaicans, right? And when they did Luke Cage's second season, child, I was cringing, and I was born here like, oh, them Jamaican accents is terrible.
Right.
Yeah, the only thing I will say this, the only thing that the antagonist got right is when he sucked his teeth. That's the only thing he got right.
This was truly Jamaican. I think he's truly Jamaican, his antagonist. But I take a different stance on that, because there wasn't that outrage when Denzel Washington played Stephen Biko. There wasn't that outrage when Forrest Whitaker played Idi Amin. I mean, there wasn't the same outrage.
And they were horrible.
You take
that wasn't bad.
Actually, I kind of like Forrest Whitaker when he played Idi Amin. His accent wasn't good.
You also got to remember
the accent wasn't there, but he had the mannerisms. And
yes.
You also got to remember that those two films were American made.
Right, exactly. I think somebody else is like, they said that too. Those are like American movies. But you know, but even in that particular vernacular, like I said,
right.
But
they are. But I mean,
but the same thing. Luke Cage is American made. I mean, Luke Cage is American made.
They should still respect the culture, regardless of where it's in.
Many of those. I mean, aren't there many of those movies? Many of those movies, and Sean hit on it when he talked about, what did Sean say? Sean said the magnitude of my knowledge of African Americans came from where?
Television, media.
They are controlling the narrative. That
Absolutely.
The vision of you better not marry that American.
In other words, the dynamic is that if Harriet was a Nigerian-made movie about Harriet Tubman, no African American would have had a problem with that. But the issue that you're looking at is American jobs, and then on top of that, a person that has disrespected African Americans taking on the role of an iconic figure.
Exactly. I had a problem
That's
with
what's
that.
going on.
I definitely had a problem.
Martha, truly, let me ask you this. If Irvino had never made that comment about the American ghetto accent, would we still be having this conversation?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think
we
we
You
would.
know
would.
what?
I think
Yeah,
Probably,
we would.
yes,
Yeah, I
probably,
think that we
but
would.
but not,
but not to
but
the
not
extent.
in anger.
But not in, yeah, but not in,
We
yeah,
would,
but not in the
right.
extent that
We
we're
would have
having
the
it.
conversation, but not in anger,
Right.
because we looked at that after she insulted us.
Right.
Let me say this. I'm telling you how we looked at it. Because after she said what she said and then got that role anyway, we looked at that as white supremacy slapping us in the face. That's how we looked at it.
Okay, but
and Cynthia being a tool to do
we
it.
diminish the craft of acting by saying that you need to have someone as authentic as possible to fulfill.
Well,
No, I don't.
I don't think that's the case.
Sure.
I mean, like,
And
you know, I think, and like and even like someone else said, like, you know, Idris Elba plays like, you know, some people, but and not a lot of people had issues with him. I think oftentimes like it becomes more of an issue when you have the disrespect part of it, you know, and like even like with Daniel Kaluuya, when he got casted as Fred Hampton, but you know, had an interview where he said, I don't want to talk about race.
Exactly.
And we're like, how are you going to sit up here and say, I don't want to talk about race when you are playing an iconic person like Fred Hampton, who was a Black Panther, whose whole advocacy was about race. You know what I'm saying? So and that becomes an issue.
Right.
I agree. As an actress, you know, I don't only want to play Jamaican roles. There's not enough out there for me to survive. So I definitely don't think that that's the issue, that it's about whether or not she is English necessarily. Because we have Naomi, I forget her name right now. She's a British actress. She's played different roles and American roles, and no one talks about that because she's not.
The difference is like, there's a difference between playing a role and playing the role of a hero of African Americans.
Right.
That's the difference.
That makes a difference. And just to, once again.
So you're saying that role should have been given to an African American woman and not a Nigerian woman?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the premise of that?
Exactly.
Tell me, what is the premise of an African American woman playing? Because Irvino did an awesome job at embodying the strength.
Well, I promise you, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, she did?
I plan on actually watching it. Like I watched a few clips. The movie. Well, I think that like, but again, like I said, like, you know, the movie itself had issues. Well, let's just keep it clear. I mean, like, you know, a lot of it was not historically accurate, you know, and also too, and I mean, like, and I believe in creative license as well, but you know, come on, y'all, big or long, let's go, come on, y'all. But you know, but at this
fabricated.
What is this? You know, but the thing about it is, when we were even talking about, you know, this particular role specifically, you know, there is going to be a different nuance of an actress that plays a role when this is of their lineage versus a person who doesn't really know a lot. And she said that. She said, I didn't know a lot about Harriet Tubman. I didn't know a lot about slavery. I just knew it happened. I had to go in and do my research and get coached and all this other different stuff, you know, in order for me to be able to play it as accurately as I can. Imagine a person who actually grew up here, whose lineage of this is, and who has been exposed to this particular story for all their lives. I mean, this historical context all their lives. So when they're actually awarded a particular role, they're going to play it a bit differently than a person who has just been exposed to this particular thing yesterday. There's going to be a difference.
I fully agree with that. I can't say I fully agree with that, because there are some African Americans that aren't fully acquainted with Harriet Tubman. There are many African Americans that you talk to will say that I mean, when we think about Candace Owens, as crazy as she is, we'll be like, well, I'm not, you know.
Candace ain't ADOS. I'll tell y'all that. Candace is not ADOS. So that's one thing.
When you think of Jamaican history, I just want to say this as an actress. If someone were to play Nanny the Maroon, I'm sorry. If they're doing a story of Nanny the Maroon, an iconic historical figure, Jamaican woman, and they gave somebody else, I would have a problem with that. Because Nanny the Maroon is iconic history, and I know her story in and out. And as an actor,
about that, I think,
and I understand that, but I agree with
especially as a Black person. We each have a lineage and heritage and experience of oppression.
Yeah, but it's different.
But it's not the same. But it's kind of like one of the things it's kind of like this.
Is the same, but to say I can't pull from a history of oppression and understanding the need for I
don't think they're saying that you can't do the role. That's not it. It's not that you can't pull the experience. You can't create that as an actor. I think you can. The difference is that I just think honor the culture, honor the people. There's so many African American actresses out there. Trust and believe when I tell you, especially here in LA.
I
think there's a lot of great actors out here that deserve an opportunity.
So if an African American plays Nelson Mandela, if an African American gets the role of a Nelson,
my God, Jennifer Hudson played Winnie Mandela. It was horrible.
So
it was not the right casting.
Culture. I disagree with that.
It's
okay.
Unless I'm missing a piece.
Winnie Mandela. I'm sorry, an African American played Winnie Mandela in the movie. I'm sorry, but that particular actress or another African American actress, maybe, but I think there are a number of South African actors that could have done that job.
I disagree with that. Because exactly what you said, Andrea, it's not that for you, you're saying it's not that they couldn't embody the role. What you're saying is that they dishonor the heritage.
I'm just saying, listen, the same way as you have Jamaican actors out here, why give the role to an American if they're Jamaican actors that can do it and do the accent and give you everything?
For me, I guess I'm an all around person where I feel like, because I listen, I've been following the ADOS movement, and again, as a Pan-Africanist, I support ADOS. What I don't support is those comments when one of the leaders said Nigerian Americans should not come over to America and benefit from.
I don't agree with those blanket. I don't agree with that either.
One of the things.
I'm sorry.
So okay, are you all? You know what? That's kind of interesting. You got on this particular point, and I kind of want to end up having this conversation again, because like we're coming to the mark where we're going to have to close up. But one of the things that I would like you ladies to do when you get a chance is read this book. Read that book.
Okay, let me write this down.
Yeah, I would like for you all to read this book.
One of the things I think is very important for us as immigrants to do is to definitely acquaint ourselves with African American history. I am happy and privileged to have gone to Howard, and that's where I got my education. That's where I got my knowledge. It's not the only place you can get it, but I am so thankful that I was immersed in that experience, because it really gave me an understanding of African American experience, the African American experience, and made me respect the culture, respect the people and what they have gone through. Because yes, I heard a lot of nonsense growing up in certain neighborhoods, and African Americans are X and African Americans are this. Watching television, you see certain things, and you think culturally. So for me, having been in that, going to Howard and being immersed in that education and being active politically on campus, that gave me a different understanding So I think all immigrants that come here, because everybody comes here and benefits, period, from what African Americans did in this country and suffered and, and created. So everybody benefits. Every immigrant benefits. I don't care where you're from. Europe, no matter where you immigrated from, you're benefiting from that. So I get that. And I respect that. And we all need to educate ourselves on the African American experience and what they've gone through. So I will definitely read that book. And you're right. But I don't think that Michelle says she's Pan-Africanist, so am I. And I believe in that, the coming together of that. And that by no means should negate in any way ADOS and their experience and their claim to America, period.
Or reparations, right.
Yeah, and yes, that's true. And I think that it's nothing, I don't necessarily have an issue with a person who wants to garner to a Pan-African ideology if that's what they want to do. But it should never be at the point, and I said this to, I believe, both of you on the chat, where we actually have claimed an identity that this becomes an area of contention. Right. What I call myself and what I'm going after and how I identify myself is of me. And it has nothing to do with, somebody else saying, no, you can't call yourself Cynthia. Who are you? No, this is who you? This is who I am. Okay. And to be honest, especially when it comes to Black Americans that are native born here and have been here through their lineage for centuries, we have created our own tribe. Our own tribe is very much so steeped in the American history in America. And I would even always say that Black history is American history.
I agree.
But ladies, you know what? I want us to have a part 2 to this conversation because there was a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to get to that I did not get to because we were just talking. But you know what? But I'm very glad that we really, started to have this really conversation, because I think that a lot of things were being brought up that needed to be, talked about, addressed, thought on. And I would even encourage everybody to kind of go back to this video, watch it, really let some of the things that have been said sink in. I think that, hindsight when it comes to a lot of these particular conversations are 2020. And then, you may get a different, sensibility or understanding about different things, when we actually have a comeback. Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I didn't want to chase you guys away.
Yeah.
This is great. Sit down and eat.
I love food. We have
to be honest with you, I can never get into food, but I do like this this vegetable dish that my niece was telling me about. Got peppers and onions and well, that's delicious, but fufu, very bland.
Fufu is just cassava. We eat cassava in Jamaica in the bammy, but we make it into bammy rather than make it into fufu.
You know what, though? The amazing thing is that as many countries as I've been to in the world, I have never been to any country in the Caribbean.
Really? You need to get
not one.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, we already discussed this. Post-COVID, we taking a trip to Jamaica. And I'm not telling no. And if I have relatives that's still there, I ain't telling them I'm coming. How about that? Everybody, thank you again. Thank you, Michelle, Andrea, Sean, thank you for coming. Arthur, as always, love you, baby. I thank you all. And shout out to the chat. Thank you guys for actually tuning in. We really do appreciate you all just joining in this conversation. We will have a part 2. Stay tuned for that. But, in the meantime, make sure, again, like this video, subscribe to YFNA News, hit the bell so you can get a notification every time that we go live. And if you like the content, become a Patreon. All the show and all the links for those things are below. We even want to thank our Patreons that we have now, Marsha Filipello, BestName Ever, Marlon Watson, and me. So, because I believe in what we do. So, you guys... Thank you all for being here. And everybody, have a good night.